Hello and welcome to ActiveNet Bites. ActiveNet Bites celebrates our brilliant guests that come to our events, whether that be speakers, whether it be supplier partners, or whether it's operators. And today I get to interview Suzanne. So, Suzanne, tell us who you are, what you do, and who you do it for, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. So my name is Suzanne Gabb. I'm the COO of Good Boost.
Mhm.
I've been with Good Boost for about coming up to 3 years, but come from a leisure operator background. Good Boost creates AI or intelligent decision making, physical activity programs for individuals suffering from long-term health conditions,
Mhm.
both in the water and on land.
Okay, fantastic. And you've been a great supporter of ActiveNet. It's always a pleasure to see you there. You're always busy. Lots of people always request you. And you're coming up to Crieff Hydro on where are we? On the 10th of September, which is only a couple of days away, really. So I'm looking forward to seeing you and catching up. And I'm sure all of our operators are looking forward to chatting to you. But the reason for this chat is more about some of the insight and data that you've created as part of some research you've been doing. So do you want to share sort of who you spoke to? What's the context?
Yeah, so we've actually published our first publication,
Mhm.
and we did it through our CEO Ben Wilkins is the lead writer on it, as well
Mhm.
as Dr. Ben Waller, who is one of our co-founders.
Mhm.
And what we did is we looked at our data and took 4,429 participants
Mhm.
that had come through the Good Boost program, and we have done a comparative study looking at interactions or interventions within physiotherapists. So we've recently gone through a transition to cover more long-term healthcare, which is why, or long-term health conditions,
Mhm.
which is why I said that at the start. But this really looked at individuals suffering with musculoskeletal
Right.
conditions. So through that, we had some really interesting learnings and insights. We also looked at a comparative cost model to the
Mhm.
NHS, and then looked at some kind of next steps, what are needed from a publication point of view and from an academic point of view. But then also, what I'm more interested in is how do we take the learnings from the study and implement it into the leisure sector?
Okay. So this is primarily then individuals that took part through the MSK Hub piece with
Yeah,
UK Active? Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
that's
So,
great. But only through we only use data from Good Boost participants.
sure.
And looking at a wide amount of leisure centres in that area.
Okay. And you mentioned you almost twin track something. So you looked at what would be the equivalent intervention within the NHS from a clinical point of view and a cost from that point of view.
Yeah.
So what sort of things did you find out as a result of doing that comparison?
Yeah, so one of the things that we looked at is we looked at 12 digital sessions, so 12 sessions of individuals coming into our sessions. For those of you that haven't come across Good Boost before, how it works is an individual or participant would be referred on to the leisure center, whether that be
Mhm.
self-referral or through a GP. They fill out a health questionnaire that sits within our tablets. Some of those go into generic health questions,
Mhm.
but quite a lot of detail. And then you can fill out specifics around your any musculoskeletal conditions. That then goes through the algorithm. Before and after each session, we ask participants questions about how they're feeling that day, what their pain function is. And then we ask them questions at the end about how they're feeling, but also drill down into whether or not the exercises were right for them and if any caused pain. That then goes through our artificial intelligence to continue to create new exercises. So we found that 12 of those virtual digital sessions where
Mhm.
participants completed it, and we compared it to six face-to-face sessions.
Yeah.
We found that on terms of the pain, the physical function, and the overall improvements of the patients after 6 weeks and 12 weeks were the same.
Okay.
Um, However, it's the cost that is
Mm.
the difference because it's £168 per participant of NHS savings in order to do it, through the virtual way rather than
Okay.
going to a face-to-face physiotherapist. And I think the other interesting metric is also how accessible this is because you can self-refer on, you can go on
Yeah.
immediately. And we all know if you self-refer on to a physiotherapist, actually that cost metrics is going to be
Mm.
greatly increased because the average physiotherapist session one-to-one is £60 per
Okay.
hour. So
Yeah.
that would be heavily increased there.
Brilliant. And just, I always get too interested in these things, which is why I
Mhm.
run a stopwatch. But why did you get any other fringe benefits from that actual participation? Because maybe the social interaction people were having when they were using the water and things like that?
Yeah, so what we didn't drill down to is the social interaction because it's really hard
Yeah.
to evidence that within the paper. However, what we know from our participant data is that social action is incredibly crucial to the participants' longevity, not just within that program, but also being referred on to other aspects within the leisure center, which again is something we want to support leisure centers do. So you constantly hear individuals talk about the fact that their mobility has improved, their pain has come down, even pharmaceuticals, they're using pharmaceuticals less. Um, but the overarching one that they continue to talk about is the fact that they have found a community. They're
Mm.
speaking to other individuals who are facing the same social isolation that they're facing on a day-to-day level, and it's giving them the ability to create those connection. And we quite often hear from these individuals that this is the only form of communication they're
Mm.
getting from other people outside of 2 minutes hellos when if they're going off to the grocery stores or the shopping centers.
Mm.
So that element of it, we do know is incredibly crucial in order for these.
Absolutely. And it's a really forgotten metric when we start thinking
Mhm,
about what we do and how we do stuff. Now, as
mhm,
a business, obviously, Active Insight that runs ActiveNet absolutely loves research, loves data, loves insight, but ultimately it's what you do with it. So
mhm.
give us some highlights, give us some types of tips that individual organizations can think about as a result of what you found out.
Yeah, so I think what we found out is that we can offer services in leisure centers that
Mhm.
can support the NHS. That is the basic broad message that we need to get across. Now, by having an accredited, like peer-reviewed academic
Mhm.
piece of work, that's what the NHS is going to look like. So our leisure centers that are already working with us have this and are able to include that into packs going out to the NHS. But I also think it's about altering the way that we're speaking to those individuals.
Mhm.
And you and I have talked before about the fact that, quite often in the leisure sector, we're seeing statistics that are quite significant. So, we quite often we would use weight loss as a
Mhm.
statistic. And if someone is really focused and able body on those things, you quite often see quite large, especially at the start, numbers coming off of the scale. Sometimes people with health conditions, the statistical changes are really narrow. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes that scares us in the leisure sector to talk about those two clinicians in the NHS because we're doing it with a leisure sector hat on where we're used to seeing huge numbers. But actually, in the times that I've now talked to the clinicians and showed them, even those 4% clinical improvements in terms of pain function, their mobility function,
Mhm.
and their quality of life, the clinicians are really happy with those marginal improvements. So I think not being afraid of the data that you're getting through the dashboards, where we do show that for each of our
Mhm.
sites, and then further communicating that on to clinicians and to the NHS and your partners that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you're having conversations with Julia at Active Insight
Mm.
around our consumer panel, some of our non-user research that we're able to access to see if what we can find out from people who don't take part in activity. But I guess the key for me is always about language. And you just hinted on it there a little bit about the difference of a 4% increase in clinical performance, etc. But what's the advice around language, Suzanne?
Yeah, so I think we need as the leisure sector to educate ourselves on
Mhm.
what language we should be using
Mhm.
when we're talking to the NHS. And I think what we've learned is, as I think you would agree, and a lot of people who have been in this industry a long time, watching the pivot since 2020 with the health focus
Mhm.
in the leisure sector has been incredible. It's been really exciting, and it's been so lovely to see so many operators steer away from an area that they're quite comfortable in and put incredible emphasis and strategical importance in their leisure centers about focusing on health.
Mm.
So which is incredible. But just because our industry can pivot and change that quickly doesn't mean that every industry can pivot and change. And we can see that from the news and everything that's going on with the NHS. So I think, for those that are listening to this right now are probably more at the director or senior level, but I think it's empowering those individuals
Mm.
underneath of you to start taking time out within their job to learn, how do I communicate better to the NHS? What words are they using? What marketing materials? And if you don't know, Good Boost is here to support you with that. But there's also amazing resources out there to help you, even on the NHS help, to help you then pitch your strategies and your marketing material to be able to communicate better to that sector.
Brilliant. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you at Crieff Hydro up in Scotland. It's a lovely venue. I think you've been actually to
I
twice.
have. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah,
And I'm sure we'll get to see you on the 26th and 27th of March at Eastwood Hall for our national event as well. So we
absolutely.
will see you then. Suzanne, thank you so much for your time. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Okay. Bye bye.